For the last couple levels, we've been looking at measuring economic growth. So let's just do a little bit of a recap. So economic growth is the change in real GDP per capita. So we've talked in the previous levels about how we measured GDP, and of course GDP being gross domestic product. And what that is it's the total value of all final goods and services produced in an economy, typically over a year. So we're looking at the total value of everything that we make, and because we don't want to double count, we're using final goods instead of including all goods, because remember, you don't want to count the eggs that are in the cake and the cake, because the price of the cake includes the eggs. So it's total value of all final goods and services produced in an economy in a year. And we've looked at the issues of measuring GDP, and we've looked at the approaches to measuring GDP. So if you'll recall, we measured GDP with the expenditure approach and the income approach. And so if we recall back to our circular flow diagram, we talked about how we could measure the size of the economy really at 2 points. We could measure it based on national income. So we could look at the money we make from selling our factors of production, right? We make wages, we earn interest, we get paid rent, and we make profit. So wages, interest, rent, and profits, those factor payments, are one way to measure the size of the economy. Essentially, we're getting paid to make those goods and services. We can also measure the size of the economy based on the expenditure approach by looking at who does the buying of the goods and services. And so if you recall, when we were looking at measuring GDP based on the expenditure approach, we were looking at how households buy goods, businesses buy goods, the government buys goods, and other countries buy goods. And then we had to subtract away the fact that sometimes when we buy goods and services, they come from other countries. So we measured the size of the economy as C plus I plus G plus X minus IM. So our expenditure approach measured the size of the economy, C plus I plus G plus X minus IM. The income approach measured it as wages, interest, rent, and profits. So we can measure the size of our economy in 2 different ways. Now, once we have GDP, we want to find real GDP. And remember, real GDP, so we have real GDP, and we have nominal GDP. What's the difference? Well, remember our discussion about the pizza and calzones economy? The real GDP used base year prices, and nominal GDP used the current or market year prices. So really the difference between real GDP and nominal GDP is just the year of the prices. And we turn it into real GDP, so we take out inflation, so we can compare one year to the next. With economic growth, we're looking at that change in real GDP per capita from year to year, so we need to be able to take out inflation. So we need some base year prices. So once we have our real GDP, whether it's measured in expenditure or income approach, we would then divide by the size of the population. And then we would look at how that changed from one year to the next. So let's take a look at an example here. All right, so let's look at economic growth for Canada. So let's start first by going to the Stats Canada website. And if we were to measure economic growth, we're going to need real GDP, and we're going to need the population, so we can do per capita. So let's start first by collecting some populations. So if we go in here, we can see there's quarterly population estimates, And if you scroll down to any of these daily digests, you can go and you can get the source data. Here we have it, table 1710.000.901. You can see here on the right, and we can just link to that. So now let's look at the population, and let's look at Canada. And perhaps we want to compare the second quarter of 2019 to the second quarter of 2018. Well, we notice that the second quarter of 2018 is not on the page. So if I click on Add and Remove Reference Period, I can then change how far back in time it goes, and I can choose the second quarter of 2018. So you can go further back if you want to compare and see what economic growth is for a province from 2016 to 2017. You can pick your dates here. But I'm just going to look at the second quarter of 2018, and I'm going to go look at the second quarter of 2019. So when we look here, the second quarter of 2019 is 37,408,205 people. And the second quarter of 2018 was 36,889,543. So let's just go back over to our notes and let's write that in. So second quarter 2018, it was a population of 36,889,543. And our second quarter of 2019 was 37,408,205. Okay, so that was our population. Now, if we want to measure economic growth, we're going to need real GDP per capita. So we have the per capita part, but we need to find real GDP. So we can calculate real GDP if we have nominal GDP and the GDP deflator. We know already that the GDP deflator can be found by taking nominal GDP divided by real GDP times 100. So if we know 2 out of those 3 variables, we can actually rearrange the formula to find the other one. So we can find real GDP by taking nominal GDP divided by the GDP deflator times 100. So now we just need nominal GDP and the GDP deflator. So let's go find nominal GDP. All right, let's go back to our Stats Canada and back to our main page. I've got to go back a couple times here to get back to that main page. But you'll notice on the main page, you can see it says real GDP by expenditure. This link actually, if you scroll all the way to the bottom, you see tables 1 through 5. Well, tables 2 and 3 and 4 give you the expenditure approach. Table 1 gives you the income approach. When we look at these, we can see that table 2 and table 3 say chained dollars. So that tells us it's going to give us real GDP. Table 1 doesn't mention chained dollars. It actually gives us nominal GDP. So we can use these tables in Stats Canada to find real GDP, nominal GDP, income approach, or expenditure approach. All right, so let's go to table 1. And what we are looking for is we are looking for that second quarter of 2019 and the second quarter of 2018. So we can find our real GDP per capita. Okay, so we notice here on this page that we get the second quarter of 2019. And what this is telling you is the nominal GDP was $2.298 trillion. Now we want to find the second quarter of 2018 so we can do a comparison. If we go to the link, we can go and get the full data. And again, then we can change the dates. So this is the income approach. So it actually breaks it down into wages and other forms of national income. We're looking for gross domestic product, that very last line. And we're looking for Q2 of 2019 and Q2 of 2018. So notice Q2 for 2019 is 2,298,972,000,000, and then we're going to have to add 6 zeros after that. For Q2 of 2018, it's 2,217,196,000,000, and again, we'll have to add 6 zeros. So I'm just going to take this information from our table here, and we're going to go back to our slides. And that was the population we had before, and now we have nominal GDP. So I'm just going to write it down here. Our nominal GDP for Q2 2019 was 2,298,900,000,000. Whoops. All right, where'd my slide go? 922, and then we got to add our 6 zeros. And then for Q2 2018, we had 2,217,196,000,000, and our 6 zeros. All right, we also need a GDP deflator. Okay, so if we're going to calculate real GDP, we need nominal GDP divided by the GDP deflator. Great place to go to get a GDP deflator is, of course, trading economics. So if we go into trading economics, and I just happen to have the page here on the US, you can see here in the US, you can get GDP, and notice that it gives you GDP per capita, it gives you GDP and GDP in constant prices. So trading economics will give you real GDP, that's the constant prices, nominal GDP, that's the one that just says GDP, and GDP per capita. And you can get that for Canada and the US and so on. But right now we're doing the calculations ourselves. So we're going to go in and we're going to go and find Canada. And what we need is the GDP deflator. So we're measuring inflation, okay? So under prices, that's where you find information about inflation. We're going to go GDP deflator, okay? And we're doing the second quarter of 2019 to the second quarter of 2018. So it looks like the second quarter of 2019, the GDP deflator was 110.2. And if we look for the GDP deflator for quarter 2 of 2018, it looks like it was 108.1. So I'm just going to capture this information down in our slides, but you can use this trading economics source to find the GDP deflator for a different country, or you can go directly to where they have their real GDP and real GDP per capita. So back to our notes. All right, so our GDP deflator was 110.2 for second quarter of 2019 and 108.1 for the second quarter of 2018. All right, now we're ready to do our calculation. So first, let's find real GDP. Then we'll find real GDP per capita, and then we'll find the change in that number. All right, real GDP, second quarter of 2019, is nominal GDP, 2,298,922, and our 6 zeros, divided by our GDP deflator, 110.2, and we multiply that times 100. So we're simply adjusting that 2.2 trillion for the amount of inflation compared to our base year. And remember, the GDP deflator in the base year is 100. So 2,298,922 and our 6 zeros divided by 110.2 0.2 times 100. Okay, and when we do that, we end up with 2,086,116,152, and technically 45 cents. So I'm just going to do the same thing, real GDP Q2 2018. I'm going to take the nominal GDP, 2217196, and our 6 zeros. I'm going to divide by the GDP deflator and multiply times 100. Okay, so let's do that quick calculation. 2217196, 000,000 divided by 108.1 times 100. If you're not getting answers that are in the trillions of dollars, then likely there's something wrong in your calculation. So we should end up with 2,050,060,129,509.71. Okay, so now we want to take it and find real GDP per capita. So real GDP per capita for second quarter 2019 is going to be our 2,086,136,116,152 45 divided by our population. And our population is 37,408,205. Okay, so we'll type that into our calculator. 2,086,136,116,152. 2,086,136,116,152 and 45 cents divided by 37,408,205. So real GDP per capita for second quarter of 2019, $55,766.81. We're going to do the same thing, real GDP per capita for the second quarter of 2018. So we got to take our real GDP, our 2,051,060,000,71, divided by our second quarter of 2018 population, which was 36 million. All right, let's type that into our calculator. 2,051,060,129,509.71. 2,051,060,129,509.71. Last thing I want to do is type in the wrong number. So double checking here, 36,889,543. And we find that our real GDP per capita in the second quarter of 2018 is $55,604. All right, so we have real GDP per capita. Now we need to know, if we go back to our definition, the change in real GDP per capita. So that change in real GDP per capita really just means new minus old divided by old times 100. So I'm going to take my new, 55,766.81, minus the old, 55,604, divided by the old, 55,604. New minus old divided by old times 100 because we want to turn it into a percentage. All right, so let's throw that into our calculator. All right, 55,766.81 minus 55,604 divided by 55,604 0.04. And if we multiply that times 100, our economy barely grew at all, right? So we end up with less than 1% growth. So our economy is kind of stagnating, right? We're not producing more goods and services per person based on those second quarter numbers. Okay? So a concern, right? It's not negative. Our economy is not shrinking, but we're not getting really good growth either. Right? Our goal really is 2-3% growth. Typically we're 1 or 2%. Right now it looks like we're basically not growing at all. Now, this level we really want to look at the difference between temporary growing and shrinking and sustainable growth. So let's actually go back. See if I can't get it here to go. All right, bring back my slides. Oops, not those slides. All right, come on. All right, so we've been looking at that circular flow diagram and measuring whether the economy or the size of the economy. So when we look at the economy growing or shrinking, we can do the expenditure approach or the income approach. Now, if our leakages are more than our injections, then the economy is going to shrink. If our injections are more than our leakages, then our economy is going to grow. But this is temporary growth, right? These are just short-term changes in investment spending, that's businesses, or in the amount that we're saving or paying taxes. What we want to focus on this level is how do you get sustainable long-term growth, not just short period growing or shrinking. So the next couple videos that we're going to be looking at is going to look at that long-term growth.